We're going to get started. It's good to see some people in the audience today. You never really know when you show up at some of these at Dreamforce. How many people have been to more than 5 Dreamforces? Okay, so everybody else is pretty new. 1, 2 years? Is that sort of the crowd right here? Fantastic. Welcome. We're going to get into a bit of a presentation. I'm just going to ask one other question before we get in. Developers on Salesforce? How many people have done some development work on Salesforce? Wow, 3/4 of the audience. That's fantastic. Line of business people? Who are the rest? Okay, we got a couple of those too. We're going to talk about some of the developing components today on the Salesforce platform, specifically React and Lightning, but there's also a few more surprises. So there's a few things in store. We're going to also open up some of the code, show you what some of the stuff looks like, both on the front end and the back end, and give you a good idea of how to do a lot of this work. We've actually got one of our resident experts right here. We'll get right into some of the introductions. But Ryan, how about a little bit of background on you, Propel, kind of what you're doing at Propel right now?
Yeah, sure. Hey, I'm Ryan. I'm a front-end engineer at Propel, PLM. What we do at Propel is we create product lifecycle management tools to help manufacturers take care of their bill of materials. What I also do is work with our CTO, who's mostly on the back end in Salesforce. So we're super integrated with Salesforce. We have a bunch of front end code that is built on top of Salesforce, and we can leverage both strengths of custom code in front end, Salesforce architecture to create a really good experience for our users.
So the core thing that Ryan's talking about here is the experience, but also making sure that technology fits exactly what the products are supposed to do, what the customers need them to do. I'll also give you a little bit of knowledge. The CTO he's talking about used to work at Salesforce, a guy named Ron Hess. Phenomenal individual. I've worked with him many years, and that's actually kind of a good segue. My name's Ethan Alexander. I helped start the mobile division here. So I was the very first company ever acquired by Salesforce, which is now, as Paolo might have told you earlier in the keynote for mobile, Salesforce Mobile or Mobile One. So a real good innovation, and it's amazing to see the innovation that's going on. Customers, partners, you making a difference with the platform, and keep that going. It's really an exciting opportunity. So as we open these things up, you're probably wondering, okay, if I started mobile, what is Oktana? Where'd they come from? They were a solid development team that helped supplant the mobile team when we were first acquired. We couldn't build all the Dreamforce apps back then. We couldn't build all the back-end systems back then. So I said, I'm going to help you guys out and help these other organizations that don't have expertise on the Force.com platform, Visualforce, other technologies that are now widespread and being made available throughout the organization. So it's the idea that you've got a team behind you, you've got great ideas and great customers, and you bring those all together. So that's a little bit about Oktana there. But let's talk more kind of what's going on in a deeper level. It's an organization actually that is literally one of the developers. We call them nearshore, so Uruguay, New York, here in San Francisco, kind of scattered about depending on what technology needs might be needed. It really comes down to the user requirements and the development requirements. So that could be front end, that could be full stack development, obviously mobile. So it really comes down to what are the client needs, what are your needs, if you need somebody to back your development team up. So that's my pitch. Some of the components that you've found different in working with us?
Yeah, so working with Oktana was great because they already know Salesforce, so we didn't have to teach them any of that. And the tech stack that we used, that we were deciding to use was React and Redux. And these are front-end components that help you, manage your state and manage your UI on the browser. So learning that with Oktana was super fast. So the reason why we chose these technologies is because the ramp-up time for us and for them was 1 to 2 weeks. So that was the main benefit and why we chose that. And so far it's been really great because they're able to pick up the front end and then help us with the Salesforce backend too. So they know the full stack.
It's a lot like a soccer team, football team, baseball team, pick your sport. Cricket. Anybody from England? No. But it's the idea that you have different players in different organizations that will make a difference for the overall team. And it's really getting to that end line. And that's actually one of the things that we'll kind of get into here. You'll see, if you can follow that along real quickly, the application at work. If you didn't catch that, we're going to play it again a little bit later on. But the key component here is identifying the code that's running, the user experience that's needed. What's going to make a difference to the client? Ryan, give us a little high level before we kind of go back through it one more time.
Yeah, sure. So what you're looking at right now is one of our pages. It's basically, you have a very basic Visualforce page, and you bootstrap in your React and Redux, and it just runs on the page, and you're able to take it over and do whatever you want with it. What you see on the right-hand side is something called Redux DevTools, and it's basically storing all of that state, all of your front-end temporary state. It could be temporary form data that you're going to send over, or all the information for, say, bill of materials. It could be hundreds of lines. All that is stored within Redux, so that you can present however you want. And after you're done with that, you can hook up some Salesforce remote actions to actually send that data back and save it to your Salesforce. So what you're seeing here is just one of many pages that we've created using React and Redux.
So one of the main things that Ryan's really talking about here is dynamic. Things are constantly changing, just like all of our businesses in real life. So the platform is able to react, the data is able to react, and actually everything's able to come together and kind of live that real-time life cycle. It seems a little redundant right now, but that's actually sort of critical in sort of the day-to-day operations, right? Mm-hmm. Cool. We'll get more into the detail of what was running back there. We'll actually show you some of the code and how we built that, or actually how Ryan and the team built that. And then we sort of supplanted that with some other added components and other code levels to really make sure it popped and made a big difference on that. But I mean, what's sort of the story we can tell here? I mean, we kind of covered some of the high level, but what are some of the key aspects that we needed?
Right, so the very first approach that we took was just pure Visualforce. And it wasn't dynamic enough for us. We had a lot of moving parts, and just using plain Visualforce was kind of static. And I think one time we were trying to update one of our bill of materials, which is 100 lines of data. And it wasn't cutting it just using straight up Visualforce. So that's when we started exploring new technologies. And we finally found something that worked well, and was easy for us to learn, which was React.
And then from there, it's basically like working through the other solution pieces. As we kind of step into some of I guess from Visualforce, it's sort of a grand idea. But sometimes you need to put other components together to make sure that all comes together, right? Mm-hmm. Was there anything that really kind of jumped out as like, uh-oh, I need to change or kind of modify what I'm doing here? Like, what was that sort of step point that you went through? So
we started separating the visual layer with the logic layer.
Perfect.
So React and Redux, you could take that code and you could just separate it from everything else that we have. Because we're so separated, we can do everything in Salesforce for our logic layer using triggers, using custom Apex code, and we have everything in Redux, React and Redux, which is our visual side. So we can even create two teams in our organization, one purely on visual side and one purely on the logic side. So that fine delineation really helps us with just staying within that developer context of developing UI stuff or developing logic.
As you go through this stuff, you start to realize, well, how did you come to those different technology needs or those different usability needs? Part of it is also just kind of understanding what works and what doesn't, but that's also part of the process of working with good clients. You have an idea of, okay, you're here, but where do you really want to go? What's really going to make the difference? What needs to respond to that information and the data back and forth? And of course, the dynamic sort of front-end layer of how's the client going to be working with it. So doing some of that QA testing is going to be critical to find out if some part is missing or some of the data is actually not showing up. And that's some of the things that we went through in kind of the learning process. Version 1, version 2, version 3, suddenly you find the success that goes with that. So, and actually, let's show more of the code. I think that's next here. Exactly. So, you want to talk through some of this and what really made a difference?
Yeah, so this is our Visualforce page for what you just saw before. We're hooking up things using Visualforce, but that's it. So right now, this is kind of working as just like an HTML page, basically. You're putting in your Lightning design system, CSS. You're putting in an element that you can hook up your React to, and then you're putting your actual React code. So you see this is just 21 lines of code, and that's all that you really need with Visualforce, and you can build the rest with React.
It sort of makes that difference. I think we might have, did we highlight some of these? So you can see the different code layers. If you're not a pure-fledged developer, we kind of will itemize these components out for you as we go through this, and especially as we're working together. We want to know that you're capable and what we can actually supplant in that process. So as you can see, the different components that we brought forth just to make sure everything was done right, and that visual layer was there, and all the other aspects of moving the data back and forth was seamless. Again, for the customer. They don't want any breaks or surprises in that environment. So. And then you kind of get a chance to kind of see it in action one more time there. So as you move that stuff, especially with React and Redux, there's a lot going on. And that's actually the cool factor, that there's so much possible with the Salesforce platform, but also utilizing the other technologies that are in play. I guess give me the before-after feeling. Like when you started working with this and then the experience, did everything come out like completely as expected, or was there like, oh my gosh, we could do more, we did this? What changed in that process?
Yeah, actually, let's look at the next slide, which is our before. Before we found the Lightning Design System, which I think came out over last year.
I love the color choices, though.
This
That's
is
awesome.
we actually integrated Lightning Design System, and we were just throwing code out there using Visualforce. You can see a lot of like Aloha Visualforce components that we put onto this page, and as you can see, it's not very appealing to look at.
Well, you don't even know where to start. I mean, as a
Yeah.
user, like some of the QA testing we did, it's like, great, what do I do? And that's not some way you want to walk into a great application that can do so many different things. So then you move forward.
So we actually, let's
Got
go
that.
back one. So I think about 3 months after we were running with that, Salesforce came with the Lightning Design System, I think in like alpha or beta, and we integrated that in, and it was super easy to implement and super nice to look at. So when you're actually viewing our application versus standard Lightning experience, it's basically identical, like 99% identical, and that's because they just provide that design system that you can use, and you can plug it in right away.
Right. Yeah, it makes a big difference. And then, so what's the after product look like now?
So
Familiar?
much better.
If anybody that loves Salesforce, you're going to love this. Anybody that uses Salesforce, customers, clients, I mean, everybody you're working with who's been signing up for the product. So, differentiators? What jumped out really?
Yeah, so what they provide that we find really useful is all the components they use for forms. So you have lookups, you have pick lists, everything that is available for you to use on Lightning Experience, it's available in that design system. So nothing is created from scratch for CSS.
And as you guys are doing updates, I mean, it's seamless now. As obviously it was a different problem before that, but now changes, updates for any of the customers, it's seamless, right?
Right.
I mean, that's sort of the obvious question that we all go through. It's like, if there's a change coming, you can actually project that, just like we heard from Mark in the keynote. We know what's coming. We have a good idea of what's going to be changing that environment. You can just push those right out and make those available to everybody. We'll move through.
Great. All right, so here's an example of how we're utilizing standard Salesforce platform features in our application. So one of them is approval processes. So quick show of hands, how many people have used approval processes? Cool.
Half of you?
Guys.
There's got to be more approvals in the world.
Cool. So what we're using approval processes for is we're integrating those into our UI, into our logic layer, to push forward a change order. So in our application, a change order is used to approve certain changes on a bill of materials. So you might be changing the color of your bicycle from red to blue. There might be multiple people along the way that need to approve for that change. So what we are doing is we're hooking that up into our application, using Lightning Design System, using React, and just leveraging all of that logic, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel, and we put it into our application. So it's really easy for us to just plug in whatever Salesforce has already provided, and just create our own experience that flows well with what Salesforce provides.
Yeah, setting your right information or your own information in the right environment, and letting that move forward. That's perfect. So getting back into the code, though, I mean, not the most complicated stuff. So I know we took a bunch of things out and we kind of corrected a few things just to make it simpler, but that helped the front end. That actually helped the way the database was talking to the information back and forth. But in this environment, what sort of stands out?
Right. So the beauty of React is all the UI components that you create are reusable. So when you're actually creating a approval process page, you don't have to write all the HTML again or all the CSS again. All those components are being reused. So right here we're using a card component, and we're using a lookup component and a table component. All of those, like, we're probably using that like 100 times throughout our application. So you just write it once, you can reuse it, and you can just keep creating new things. And another cool thing about React is you can pass in like new CSS classes or existing ones using the design system. So you can create a very basic component and you can pass in classes, and it'll totally change whether the table has borders or whether it changes colors on the hover. So all these things are really easy for the developer experience to create your application.
Yeah, and some of those things are sort of key. A lot of people sort of know about them, but haven't really tried them. And I think that was a great use case that we actually put those into motion. We actually made those work. Not only that, it sort of changed the whole experience. So take a few chances on some of the code and some of the different capabilities of the platform, because you will be surprised. And the way this thing has been evolving for, gosh, as I've seen it for literally the past 16 years, it does take those challenges that you're putting forward, but also the opportunity to understand what is possible in setting some of that code in the way it does. So move through again, the look and feel. So that's actually the final product right there one more time.
Yeah, so another instance of leveraging a Salesforce feature is using page layouts. So what we've done is we've pulled out all that data that's creating those page layouts, and we're translating that into something that our React app can consume. So this is another example of, hey, Salesforce already made that feature. Why not just reuse that and then make it pop in our application? And the ways you can do that is you create that logic layer, you give it to React, you use your Lightning design system, and that just makes things look so much better.
And I think one of the other things we want to talk about, give the audience an idea of time frames. There was sort of the V1, V2 that we all kind of walked through, but when you, Ron, and the team kind of set forth on this process, what sort of expectations to put forth for if somebody wanted to do something like this?
Yeah, so I think from that really obscene picture from our alpha product to
very different.
actual Lightning, close Lightning experience, it took about 2 months. So we were trying to figure out how do we create React and Redux components and create this developer ecosystem where someone from Oktana can just jump in and help us out. So getting that whole process set up took about 2 months, and we've just been running with that. And the guys at Oktana are super knowledgeable about what we do. They took time to figure out how it all works. And that's been really helpful for us, because not only do we have the people at our office in the Bay Area to develop things, we have somebody offshore that can help us do things in parallel.
And part of that is the iterative process, setting up best practices, going through some of the development cycles. I think we might actually have detailed some of those out after the code. But is there anything so in the layouts and such, I mean, that would be a helpful learning lesson?
Yeah.
Sure.
So as you can see here, we just have one component, which is a form stack, and that form stack is reusable in all of our forms that are used to edit. So you can turn on editing on and off. So it can be read only, or you can pop up those input fields. It's pretty simple. All you have to do is create one component and create a component outside of it that uses it. And this outside component, you can have all your custom logic. But at its core, it's that reusable component that you create once that's generalized, so that every other component can use it if they need to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes a difference, but it's also good to be sort of well organized in sort of the starting process, but also the end result that you'd like to put together. And that's where we can bring people in at different stages to supplant whatever level of sort of expertise you do and don't have. Because sometimes if we think you got it, we're just going to push it right back to you, and then help out if there's anything that kind of pops up or kind of jumps up along the way. So it's really an opportunity to work with the strengths that you have or that you don't have and to make a difference with the team there. So, and this is sort of a good example of all the different little puzzle pieces we brought together to make this work. And some were known, some were not known. Anything you sort of point out to the crowd of like, you need to learn more about this or get educated on that?
Yeah, so a key piece for React and Redux is another tool called Webpack. Webpack basically bundles up all your scripts and converts from ES6 to ES5, so all browsers can utilize it. And it links your code. What else does it do? Just make sure that everything is, there's no errors, and it bundles everything up, puts it into one big file, and you can plop it into your page. So those three things, React, Redux, and Webpack, I think they're used in pretty much a lot of tutorials, so that that's kind of the three trifecta that's used to get started with React. And how we hook this in is we inject that into Visualforce using that really simple Visualforce page, and then we use the design system to make it look really nice.
It's key. I mean, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with some of this stuff. You probably are. There's a lot to learn. And obviously, Dreamforce is one of the best places to kind of go through that process, but also talking to people that have been through the process. And that's kind of what makes the difference here. I mean, we talked about utilizing Heroku and HTML5 and all these other aspects that could actually make the application come alive. It really kind of comes down to the details that we all need in the end result. But also, as we talked about, it's not finished. It kind of continues on. There's always more functionality and more data to kind of share with that. So best practices, what would you kind of recommend here?
Yeah, I mean, I think just reading all the documentation out there on React before you get started is good, and just kind of get a sense of how it works, and really understanding the power that's in it. Because there's a lot of front-end frameworks out there. The reason why we chose React is because, one, it's super easy to ramp up your team, and two, there's some limitations with those other frameworks, such in terms of like performance, stuff like that. So we're dealing with a lot of data. So with React, keeping that in mind that we're going to display a lot of data, we decided to run with it and stick with React. Mm-hmm. And so far, it's been a really good experience.
So we kind of split up some of the requirements as we were building the application, building the solution out. And we identified resources and brought the teams together. And that's sort of the best idea. Where can we supplant what you're working on and how can we make a difference? And it really kind of works with the communication, with Agile, with stand-ups, with all the usual stuff that we're sometimes talk about, but actually doing those things. And that will make a difference in getting the milestones done, the delivery done, and all the different process in place. So a lot of different moving parts, but I think it's a great success. And I think it's really testament to your team and having everything organized. The usual follow-on, if you want to learn more, we've actually got some of the information posted, obviously with our own websites, but different code stacks, right? Or actually, are there some components you want to share that obviously link right through for us here?
Yeah, so I actually forgot to talk about this, but that first link right there is a React Lightning design system.
It's perfect.
It's by a Salesforce evangelist, and he basically created all those visual React components that use the classes that the Lightning design system uses. So you can just download that, put it into your app, and you won't have to write out like this table component should look like this. This input component should look like that. They're all provided by that. And then we just have the link to the Lightning design system, which is super helpful in terms of what different classes you're using for CSS to make things look like the Lightning experience.
Perfect. I mean, we're just trying to make a difference here. Part of the component here is to show the education and what the opportunity is, but hopefully that made a difference. Hopefully you learned a couple of different things. Open for questions? Can we take a few? I think we've got a couple of minutes. Does anybody have a question on how to build some of this stuff? Yes, please.
Can you share with us your thought processes behind why you go the React way and not, for example, Angular way or Lightning way?
Good point. We brought all those up early on.
The key thing for us was like the speed of ramping up the team. So when we started, we just signed up with Oktana on, and we needed to get this thing running fast. I've had experience with Angular, and for me to ramp up my offshore team, it took a really long time. I think it took on the scale of 2 to 3 to 4 months.
So the learning curve.
Right, the learning curve. With React, it took them 2 weeks to learn, and I mean, sure, they know the basics, but ramping up from there, it's a linear process. But with Angular, it's like, oh, this huge activation energy, and then you finally understand everything. But that took a long time. With our offshore team, I think at my previous company we used Angular, and it took a long time.
When you consider Angular, was that Angular 1 or Angular 2?
It was Angular 1, yeah. So I'm not sure what they're doing with 2. It's like, it's TypeScript. It's not the JavaScript we know. So, I mean, it's still specialized, and I guess it serves a purpose. But for us, like we like me as an onshore person, I have to learn that first before I let my offshore know, and that seemed like a huge task to understand it. But with React, I jumped in, and I learned it within a week, and I kept going with it. And I made mistakes. Sometimes my app like slowed to a crawl, and I was like, "What is going on?" But as you dig into it, it's very easy to understand. When you're looking at the how React actually works and how Redux works, there's no magic involved. It's very clear cut.
How about Lightning?
Lightning. So with Lightning, when we first investigated Lightning components, we found that there's a lot of events going back and forth. So you have like all your components on your page, and the way they talk with each other is through events. For us, we have a lot of data on our page. Not only do we have all those tabs, but we also have a lot of information per tab. So just managing that all is super, super easy with Redux. So when we found that so Redux is like a state manager that holds all of your information in your browser to show everything and display everything. Using Lightning components, I'm not sure there's like, maybe you can create like this master component that stores all your data and like does like event delegation to listen and synchronize everything. But that's the main obstacle with using Lightning components is the synchronizing the data between components. Otherwise, you'd have to create this huge like spider's web of events going back and forth.
One more question.
Sure.
You mentioned about the reusing the Salesforce page layout. How did you get those information? Apex controller code or?
So here's the thing. Some things in Salesforce, they don't have a really good like API for you to look at. I think with Salesforce or with page layouts, we had to transform it into JSON using our own custom method, and then send that using a remote action to our UI. And some things like Salesforce has that are available to you, but they're not really easy to consume. So you kind of have to work and make it play nice and create this endpoint that you can access. And once that's done, then you can reuse that everywhere.
So do you use a SQL query on the Apex controller side to do that, or there's a?
I think for page layouts, I don't think it's SQL. I think you have to use you have to call some method and then transform it into JSON. But mostly what we do is for all of our data calls, we just have a SQL query in a method, and then we make that a remote action, and that's available for your browser to use and consume.
Excellent questions. Any others? We're here to help out. That makes a big difference.
It seemed that you had a lot of success building these compelling UIs. I was curious to know if, so far from your description, it seems like it was a fairly easy process. I was curious to know if you could share with us any challenges or roadblocks that you faced that could help other engineers.
Things to look out for.
Things to look out for.
Yeah,
Excellent.
so I already mentioned this before, but the page layout stuff, sometimes it's not easy for you to extract stuff out of Salesforce. But once you create it once, you can kind of generalize that and then pull it out. So the issue was not so much the UI code, but more the logic code and pulling out all the stuff that Salesforce provides that may not have an easy API to extract that. So that was one of our challenges. Another one was just really understanding how React and Redux work. So the power of Redux is that you have all the state for your page. It can include a bunch of information, but the key with React is React only updates when you change the properties on the component. A huge bug that I created that I had to drill in and fix, I think it took like a week, was I passed in all the data in Redux into my root React component. And that just propagated and made every component within my application update every time anything changed. So one thing to look out for, and it's a really good advice that I knew before, that I wish I had known before, was you can actually connect bits of your huge Redux data store and just connect bits of it into a sub-component like down here. It doesn't have to all come through from the root. You can have all these like little, they're called like smart components, and only those components will update. So that's one piece of advice that will save you a lot of headaches.
There's always a learning process that we all go through. That's excellent. Please.
Can React components be reused onto different platforms?
Yes.
Android, iOS, and web, and all these kind of
Yeah, actually, I think there's something called Electron or something like that. There's a lot of toolkits out there that convert your front-end code, your HTML, JavaScript into native applications. So you can investigate things like Cordova, or I think one of the tools is called Electron, where you can create React components and it'll populate into.
Now remember,
Okay.
React.js. So React is not equal to React.js, right? React.js is the one that can run native code on the devices.
React.
Oh,
React Native.
Native, yeah.
That's the React Native. So what you guys are using are the web.
Yeah, we're using the web version.
Is it possible to convert them, or you have to?
I'm not sure. We haven't crossed that bridge yet, but I'm sure there's more information out there to bridge.
We'll let
that
me try
gap.
it with you. We can help out.
Okay.
We can run those.
I guess the goal of this.
Yeah, it depends on what the overall objective is there too.
Yeah.
Is what else is going on.
Yeah, the goal of this session is just to give you a peek about what we do, and also create that ecosystem of Salesforce developers using React on their applications. So you can reach out to me. I'd be happy to talk about problems you're facing using React, because I really want you guys to be successful using this technology. So the more we all know, the more we can grow.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thanks for taking the time today, and we'll be around after. Thank you.